Greetings, beautiful people. You're listening to the Rewired Woman podcast, where you can eavesdrop on our girly chat and learn the science behind our random questions and interests. Join our conversations and follow us on Apple, Spotify, and iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcast. I'm your host, Mads, and I'm here with my super intelligent, philosophical Princess Fairy Queen, Kat.
Aww, hi.
What are you drinking?
Still fabulous juice. What are you drinking?
Oh, the mug is very hot. I just made a pumpkin spice chai latte with unsweetened vanilla soy milk and a dash of cinnamon on top. It smells very good. Do you remember your dream from last night? Do you want to share with me?
I do remember bits and pieces. So what I remember is we were at like a vacation or one of Greg's family members' houses, and the kids, meaning his nieces and nephews, all brought picnic food with them, like a bunch of sandwiches and a bunch of decorations. We went into the woods and there was all of these large foresty teepee things that we then decorated and had a themed party, and I was helping them with it, and we were surprising the adults with it. The only thing I really remember is that Paisley was, like, after we had gotten everything set up, Paisley was demanding that I get her one of the sandwiches with whipped cream on them, and she loved whipped cream on her sandwich. Oh my god, it probably had something to do with the Ren Fair I went to like a month ago, because it was pirate themed, like pirates in the forest. Anyways, yeah.
That's adorable. I love that. I know I definitely had very intense dreams last night, but I do not remember them. That's something I'm going to keep working on so that I have an actual answer.
I need to keep working on it too, because I think I had other ones, and I actually was gifted this tea for astral projection, so I should try it.
Oh, yeah. You'll have to keep us updated on how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
What are we talking about today?
Last week we talked a lot about some of the structural patterns and chemical patterns in suicidal behaviors. Now, I guess we're talking about who is most affected by suicidal ideology and who are people who are taking that ideology to attempts and fatal attempts more frequently, and why that will get us and lead us straight into stigma. And we'll talk about stigma and how to reduce stigma through bringing awareness, and how to look at the signs, get a loved one help, get help for yourself, what sort of steps you can take, what sort of resources are available to you. And then we'll talk about neuro hacks for increasing serotonin, ways to improve executive functioning, decrease impulsivity, and to improve your working memory. Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, I am so looking forward to this conversation. I don't remember if I had said this in the podcast last week, but I know as someone that's had suicidal ideations my whole life and then been affected so dramatically by someone having a suicide attempt, and then kind of my progress with dealing with that the last 5 years. Even researching for these episodes, for this podcast, and understanding more of the neural circuits and kind of how our brain is working behind the scenes. And then in this episode, what we can do to help support and change those circuits, right? Work with neuroplasticity, like we were kind of touching at the end of last episode. I'm really excited to see that, because even just learning about why that could have possibly happened gave me a lot of peace. And then now taking it that next step further, like actively working to reduce stigma, and then things you can do to help your brain to maybe not have these thoughts so intensely, or maybe even completely diminish them, is really exciting to me and just means a lot to me. So I am so glad that we're doing this episode. How do you feel about it? Especially since we are spending a whole episode specifically on who's most affected, reducing stigma, and then hacks to do it. Why do you think it's important that we dedicate another extra hour to something like this?
I think it's important because I feel like this could not be talked about enough. It feels like something that kind of hides in the shadows. And I feel like for me, it became more normalized through our relationship. And then unfortunately, it became a legitimate permanent artifact in our lives. And for anybody who has that kind of permanent effect, for anybody who has that sort of long lasting impact because of suicide, I feel like you're just waiting for that space where it's safe to talk about, safe to be heard about it. You introduced me to the AFSP walks, and now I go every year because I just need a space. I think everybody just needs a space.
Yeah. Well, for anyone listening, the AFSP, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, they spend a lot of money and resources researching and supporting families of loved ones that have passed away from a suicide attempt. And I actually was thinking about linking Armand's team link to this episode. So if anybody wants to donate specifically in his name and to, show support for our loved one, we would really appreciate it, even if it's just literally $1 or a few dollars, because that adds up.
Great idea. Well, I wrote this paper on suicide policy for my master's, and I don't feel like I talked about enough kind of a large population. I didn't really touch on enough a few populations I feel like stand out heavily when you look at statistics about suicide. And the main one that I didn't talk about at all is the increased amount of fatal attempts from men. I talked only a little bit about the two populations of transgender, non-binary youth, non-gender conforming youth has an increase in suicide risk. And then individuals within the first 30 days of discharge from inpatient psych, including emergency department holds. I did talk about a little bit last week, and I think we'll talk about more this week, as in like how that plays into stigma. But I think we should really focus on men, transgender, gender nonconforming youth.
Yes, I agree completely.
It was also strangely middle-aged men of all ages, but like also very much middle-aged men.
Was there certain data you wanted to share about why that is, or do you just want to speculate?
For now, let's just speculate like natural conversation.
Okay. I mean, I don't think it's that surprising as someone living within our society on really any of those. I don't think you, which is really sad, but I think you don't hear any of them. I think I want to acknowledge a few things, specifically with the whole white men being most likely to have successful or fatal suicide attempts, because I think something that is really important for us to bring up is I think a lot of times in feminist discourse, whenever women are talking about living as a woman, right, and being like, this is what we're struggling with, I feel like a lot of times that's when you will hear in just normal culture, just normal conversations, men popping up like, yeah, but men are more likely to have fatal suicide attempts. So I think that's really important to bring into this conversation, is that it's important to bring this up all the time so that everybody can be safer and more on the lookout and look. But then when we look at why do men feel the need to insert this kind of statistic, which is true, but why does it seem to only come up when it's in regards to feminine or female mental health? And I think a big part of that is because especially within our society, there isn't a safe space for, or culturally acceptable pathway for men to talk about their feelings and express their frustrations in healthy, emotionally intelligent ways. And so it all gets suppressed and they have no outlet, right? I think we even talked about this a little last week, that like girls, women of all ages, even if you're lucky to have a community, even if you are transgender or non-binary, hopefully you're able to find some community. And if you do find community, you're more likely to have people to talk to, I think. I could be wrong, but I think that you are more likely to have people to talk about your struggles and concerns if you are lucky to find community. And then I think in women, you are more likely to talk to your friends, even if it's not like, hey, I'm actively having these thoughts. You might be more likely to say, I'm really, really struggling with this. I'm really suffering. I have a lot of anxiety. I'm not sleeping well. Whereas men are less likely to do that. Cisgendered men are less likely to do that within their male friendships. And so by the time they get to their 40s and 50s and they're looking around at their life and they're maybe really unsatisfied with it and they have no one to talk to and they think no one cares about what they really want or feel, it feels like the only option. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think it's the types of relationships that are valued. And I also think that it's ironic. So I had never had like a feminist or any feminist discourse where I've had a man chime in with that statistic back.
Oh, really?
But I think it's ironic because if that statistic is thrown out as like
Men have it harder.
well, yeah, or like women don't have a right to complain about patriarchal systems. The system is broken for everybody. I would be like, oh my God, absolutely yes. It's like when you watch them come so close to making the point themselves that like the patriarchy and masculinity is specifically toxic masculinity, not all masculinity. I want to be very clear, but the presence of toxic masculinity in the patriarchal system hurts everybody. And this is evidence
Of that.
it does. Yes. So
Exactly.
it's like, it almost like smacks you right in the face. Like this traditional masculinity and the association of high traditional masculinity actually is dangerous to men as well as women and gender nonconforming individuals and really all of us, because it creates hyper individualism, which separates and isolates people from community. That's also capitalism, colonialism, industrialism. I just think specifically if we're talking about men and how they are able to communicate or the types of relationships they value or the types of traits they value in other people, it stems from what they are told is valuable about them.
Yeah.
And that comes from this societal, high traditional masculinity, which I don't think that all men subject themselves to this. However, even when you try your hardest not to, man, woman, gender nonconforming, individual, anybody, even when you try your hardest not to, I feel like it's really hard to ignore the fact that men are valued on what they provide. And I saw a lot of financial insecurity can be a stressor that adds to someone's risk of suicide. So unemployment is actually the number one factor that increases your risk for suicide.
Wow.
Because when you're unemployed, I mean, if the majority of people having fatal suicide attempts, then we're getting this data mainly from men, and unemployment in men, can strike that sort of traditional masculine wound of being a provider. And so I would say that I just found that interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is interesting. I also think it's interesting you've never heard that because I feel like that is so common.
I don't argue with men about feminism.
Yeah, but more like just a casual observing online. I feel like whenever any woman speaks out about it in the comments, it's always men being like, men are the most likely to commit suicide. And then it's like you said, yeah, that's the point of this conversation, bro. But that's literally the point, is that it's harming everyone to be in a society that values aggression, violence, looking out for yourself above all others, impulsivity. Yes, you got it. But stop there. Anyway, do you want to touch any more on that specifically, or just move more into like other groups that are most at risk and kind of why that might be?
I think a lot of what I'm thinking about is speculative. I do have research on it, but I feel like
I think it's fine to stay in speculative territory.
yeah, and we know this is so fucking controversial.
Let's say it because we don't have to put it in if we decide it's too much.
Essentially, there are lots of areas of men's emotional maturity, and actually, I would beg to say they're like frontal lobe in general and executive functioning that develops at a slower rate than women. And we were talking about yesterday that the prefrontal cortex, executive functioning, impulsivity, those are the things that essentially equate to a higher likelihood of these behaviors. But we don't necessarily see higher rates of depression and anxiety in men, which you'd think you would. Well, not anxiety, but we don't see higher rates of like depression. Like we don't see men taking more SSRIs than women, which you'd think you would. Anyways.
Yes, but I will push back on that also can be part of the cultural reasoning for why they have a higher rate of fatal suicide attempts because they get less help. I don't know, but my speculative guess is that is part of the problem, right? Is that I think women, right, especially cisgendered women, are more likely to get help, to seek support through friendships, through their doctor, and are more likely to get prescribed these medications. And I think because we've come really far in the stigma around mental health and medications in the last 15 years, but I don't know that that's fully caught up to men, like where men are being like, hey, like talking openly about lorazepam and Zoloft and Lexapro and all this stuff. It is happening more within women's circles, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't know that they have higher rates of anxiety or depression. I don't know, but I also think it's not, I don't know that we don't know that it's equal or more because they might just not be seeking help or being honest that they need help. And that's partially why it ends up leading to more anger and aggression and violence, right? Because a lot of times sadness often shows up as anger, repressed anger. Like, especially when we're thinking from a spiritual and even psychological point of view, the anger is generally thought of as repressed sadness. And a lot of men are, oh, I got full body goosebumps. A lot of men are so angry because they are never allowed to be sad.
I've had people say that to me. Essentially, they weren't allowed to be sad and that they're really only allowed to be angry. But says men are most likely to use like the lethalist of means because I think that they're afraid of it, not of somebody finding them in a attempt, because what it would mean, and then they'd have to talk about it. And because it's so impulsive, they think about what is literally the most harmful, effective way I could do this.
Yeah.
Whereas like me as a woman, or as a cisgendered woman, I'm just trying to think about what is the least painful way I could do this.
I think even when you think of movies, like whenever couples will broach this topic, it's always the woman being like, yeah, I'll just poison you. Like, I can't think of a specific movie right now, but I know they definitely come up, like a husband and wife will be talking like, if you were going to kill me, how would it happen? And the wife is always like, I'll poison you. And the husband's like, I would decapitate you. And she's like, what the fuck? Yeah.
Yeah.
The homicide is not really the same thing, but you get the point of what I'm saying though.
Yeah. I think it's you're speaking to that tendency to violence, that not recoiling at blood or gore. And I don't necessarily think that all women do at all. I think there are a lot of women who are really into horror films and things like that.
Actual statistics to back up the idea that predominantly women are using less lethal means, less violent means than men on average.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that are most likely. I don't know why I'm saying most likely to have fatal
Moist
suicide.
likely. Oh,
Moist,
sorry.
and then we can kind of pull all this back together in terms of like, so like, what do you actually do with this information, and what does this mean for you as a living person with friends or yourself?
Good thinking. Look at you. You're the anchor today. Do you want to start? And I'll chime in.
I think you
want me to...
looked at the data more, so I'm going to let you take the lead on that.
All righty. Well, we don't have to be data forward, Mads. You are so intelligent and wise, and I've never seen you shy away from starting the convo.
You're right. I did tell you leading into this conversation, though, that my brain was feeling very slow.
You're right.
Today, we are talking about transgender and non-binary youth who, unfortunately, are heavily impacted by suicide.
I think this one, to me, feels very obvious that when you are discriminated against or when you don't feel comfortable in your own skin and you are being perceived in a way that doesn't align with how you feel on the inside. I can't really speak to it from personal experience. However, when what you are on the outside could not match what you feel on the inside, and that's not your doing, or feeling like it's not in your control at that moment, I could see how that would cause a level of distress that you can't really even understand how to cope with and would lead you to that place. It would be even more intense if family members kind of denied to acknowledge the identity you know and feel at your core. And I think this subject would be really...
I mean, it'd be fucked up of us not to cover this.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly what it would be. It would be fucked up of us not to mention that this is not a problem, even though we have experienced it. This is not a problem that really affects us as much as it affects other individuals whose experience is indescribable from our current standing in life. The study I found was actually done by the Trevor Project, which you know quite a bit about.
So I'll definitely link resources to the Trevor Project, which, if you haven't heard, they are one of the best nonprofits for helping specific LGBTQ plus people, but specifically trans people, and getting them access to resources and support. So we'll link that in the show notes.
It was released last year that there was a study done by the Trevor Project that actually linked higher rates of suicide attempts in transgender and non-gender conforming youth to the passing of anti-trans laws in their state. So it was state by state kind of set up. And for the states that passed anti-trans legislation, the rates of suicide for youth in those states increased. And there was a direct link.
Wow. Of course, we're talking on a very personal level a lot of times in this podcast, but how much public policy and the government, as much as people want to be you don't have to, not everything's about politics. Everything really is about politics, because even something like this showing such a direct correlation between certain policies being passed and then how that's having these really adverse effects on the people it's targeting. You can't deny that.
Yes.
Everything is politics. And I think I also want to address, before we go more into this, I think it's really important to both of us in our hearts to talk about this and acknowledge that it's not our direct experience. And so we think it's really important to link to resources and talk about things that aren't in our direct experience and acknowledge that we don't know everything and that we're open for feedback as well.
Yes, absolutely.
I actually pulled up the Trevor Project. So in their 2024 survey, they found that 39% of LGBTQ plus young people seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. 39%. And that didn't even group it just by trans individuals, but by everyone in the LGBTQ plus spectrum. And so that just shows the significance of this, though, and that even if you don't understand, or even if you're worried about how you're going to be perceived because you think you're going to say the wrong thing, I seriously believe that the most important thing that you can do is to be really clear that you're on their side, whether you understand or know what to say or not. And just by having these conversations and being a safe place and kind of knowing what you can do to support them or to help
I think another thing is awareness and essentially erasing the faux pas around these conversations and being able to broach these subjects. We talked about in the high risk of, cis white men, that is a problem that stems from a lack of communication, a lack of voicing. And so I think whether you feel socially positioned to speak on it is a mute point. You can't really overlook people.
But basically, avoid misinformation and offer hope. Suicide is complex. There are almost always multiple causes. But I know we kind of went over this from the brain side the other day of the cellular or neurological reasons you might be doing this. But in the average person, right? Dare I say everyone, you can't see inside someone's brains. So kind of the risk factors the mental and physical risk factors that you should look out for. I think it's important just to go over quickly. And again, we'll link all of this like in writing for you to review. But the big thing is history or signs of depression, history of mental illness, history of being abused or mistreated, self-injury, tendency to be impulsive, major physical illness, affective disorders like mood disorders, which I know we covered quite a bit last week, and then previous attempts. And then the big environmental factors you should look at is barriers to mental health services, lack of community support. I'll say those two big ones are ones that we've been covering the last 20 minutes. Homelessness, a death or relationship breakup, job loss, or change in financial security, as Kat was talking about earlier, feeling unsafe, family history of suicide, high stress family environment or dynamic, academic or family crisis, and easy access to lethal materials. But something that I did need to bring up last time, and we didn't get to it, but also is like, it would be fucked up of us not to include or say something, is that there was one research study I found that was talking about the number one thing we could do to prevent suicide is to reduce access to firearms, which sounds like no duh. And I remember it also was from like early to mid 2000s. And I looked up at my mom and was like, Mom, how are we still having this same conversation? This paper was written in 2008 and it was talking about the number one way we can prevent suicides is to have higher regulation and less access to firearms, because as we talked about, it's a typically more impulsive decision. And if you can remove the ease of which people can go through with the act, they're very unlikely to look for other resources in that moment. And it ties in with like the policy and legal level of stuff.
Politics is everything, right?
I'm quoting this from a paper, and this is from a systematic review, which for anyone that's not in the science world means they are looking at a wide range of studies, not just one. So they didn't do their own experiment. They looked at a bunch of different published research and then did statistics on that. So this particular research looked at 28 nations. This was published in 2013, so 12 years ago. And I'm quoting them. There may be no more effective approach to suicide prevention than to reduce access to means on a large scale. Access to firearms in the United States represents a prime example. Firearms are the leading cause of suicide death in the United States, and laws regulating the availability of firearms vary by state. And then they said, yes, there is a common assumption that if someone seeking to attempt suicide has a method of choice blocked, he or she will simply find another method. The data described above provide strong evidence disputing this assumption. A probable explanation is that suicidal crises are motivated by extreme pain, hopelessness, and other distressing affective and cognitive states. They ebb and flow over time. Anyway, back to what you were saying.
I do think that last part's interesting. If we're talking firearms, we can also talk about highly traditional masculinity. And so this paper essentially says that there is, in male suicide death, highly traditional masculinity may be an underlying influence, increasing the probability of externalizing behavior risk factors such as anger, violence, gun access, and school problems. So it says here that men die by suicide at 3.5 times the rate of women die by suicide.
So that backs up kind of everything we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. And it says the driver of this gender disparity is high traditional masculinity, which sets norms of competitiveness, emotional restriction, and aggression.
Makes sense. Well, again, we will put more extensive notes and resources in the show notes, but just to kind of bury it in your head, if you are in the United States, there is a 24/7 hotline for suicide and crisis help. It is 988. And I'm pretty sure they have texting available too. So yes, you can text or call or do a chat online 24/7. The languages are in English and Spanish. 988. So we want to talk about what you can do from here, whether that's for yourself or for people that you know. Because I think we talked about brief, one of the big themes, even though on the outside you're like, what does a middle-aged white cis dude have to do with trans youth? But ultimately that comes down to community and being allowed to exist in a way that you really want to. The congruence between what you want and what your life actually is.
And societal expectations.
Yeah, of like who you should be and what you are and
what we value.
What you value. So we want to end the podcast, right, in this conversation in a really hopeful way and with practical steps that you can take. The biggest thing you can do, whether you are the person experiencing these thoughts and behaviors or you notice someone in your family, friends, or community are, the biggest thing you can do is to talk to people and reach out for support. Overwhelming research shows that talking to other people is one of the most helpful things you can do to help someone not feel alone and to feel seen and understood and that someone cares about them. Would you agree on that, Kat?
Yes, and this goes back to the myth that you pointed out that people are so scared that if they see somebody who they think might be experiencing or struggling with thoughts of suicide, they think that talking to them is going to make it worse. And the research overwhelmingly shows that that is a non-issue. If you're concerned, showing concern is the best thing you could do, giving somebody a space to talk about it, taking the faux pas and the stigma away from it. Support, support, support.
Yes. And if it's just you or you need to get your friend or family member support, we've mentioned a few different resources, which we will also link in the notes, but you can have talk, chat, or text help 24/7 from 988. Think like 911, but 988. You can also go directly onto the Trevor Project website or the AFSP, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention website. All of those have resources for you and your family, and they can help you with some of the things we'll bring up in a few moments.
Yeah, and the AFSP also has very targeted groups. So veterans suffering from suicide, like they will get into every single niche if you feel like you have some sort of like co-occurring issue that is the root or what stems a lot, or you feel like this person doesn't really want to talk about the suicide on its own, but needs some other form of common ground and is worried about the group that they're going into. Communities do also have support groups, and I would highly recommend one-on-one counseling as well for those people who feel like, you know, they're a burden on their loved ones, or they just don't feel like people really care or want to hear them. I take a lot of solace in knowing that I pay somebody to care, to listen to my issues.
Yeah. So if you are able to afford therapy, that is a really, really excellent resource that cannot be diminished.
Yeah, here's the thing. What I've found in my own journey is even if you don't have health insurance all the time, if you talk to a private counselor, somebody who runs their own practice, they are more than willing to work out hourly rates for you, and you can pay as you go. I had one of my first counselors in Pennsylvania, was $40 an hour, and they did not take my insurance, even though I had insurance, and we worked that out. So I would not shy away. I know that counseling seems like it's unaffordable or unattainable, but I will say that counselors do want to help. And if you need this kind of help, they will find someone who accepts whatever you have going on. I mean, I even know social workers who have gone on to like trading and bartering for their services because that's literally what they want to do. So don't let finances be a barrier for you. Medicaid, anything, whatever it is, I know personally that they're willing to figure out things for you.
Yeah, it's like keep looking. To your point, a lot of places will even have like pay scale. That was called sliding pay.
Yes.
Offers. So definitely looking for groups and one-on-one therapy, and then also just talking to trusted friends and family are all really, really great places to start. The next thing that we definitely want to make sure you know how to do, because let's be honest, you can't always talk to someone the moment you're having a crisis. I'm sure both you and I can relate to that, Kat. So I know something that really helped me was actually creating a safety plan. This was especially important for me right after Armand's passing. And I actually have used it all these years later in moments of even just like high panic or anxiety or depressive episodes. Do you want to kind of explain to people like what a safety plan is and like why it's helpful?
Yes. So there is actually research stating that safety plans do decrease risk from suicidal ideation to likelihood of attempt, because when somebody is in that state, that emotional crisis state of considering attempting, they're not really accessing their prefrontal cortex, right? They're not accessing the part of their brain that is able to emotionally regulate and think things through and plan. And so a safety plan is exactly that. It is what people around them can do or what they can do when they can't think of their healthy coping skills, let's say. So aspects of a safety plan usually include warning signs before the crisis occurs. So what are behaviors that loved ones or people close to them or they themselves can identify to say, whoa, like I am going into a sort of emotional crisis mode where I won't be able to access certain parts of my thinking or cognitive function if I get much more emotional. These are warning signs. These are things to look out for. It'll usually identify triggers and stressors. It will identify internal strategies in which they can use without access to people. So if they are 100% alone, they will have a list of things that they can pull from because they can't think of them themselves, like in that moment. There are also distraction techniques that it'll use. So things that can distract them, people that can distract them, places they can go. It will identify safe spaces for them, environments, or things to do to their environment to help them feel more safe. And then the biggest thing will be like a list of people they feel comfortable supporting, including professionals, people in their community, family members, friends. The more variety of different types of support you can provide in a safety plan, the more likely they are to use it, because they might feel comfortable with one in one situation, but more comfortable with another in another situation. In safety plans at my work, we generally require that there's a clinician, a facility that they feel comfortable with. Oh, yeah. So we talked about one population. We kind of briefly went over it. But one of the populations that is most at risk are individuals within the 30 days of discharge from an inpatient psych, including emergency department holds. So if for some people, attempts can be more frequent. And for those people, or if they have co-occurring mental health disorders that may include psychosis that go along with this sort of ideation attempt kind of crisis state, a big part of a safety plan you can also do is what hospital do they prefer for their sort of suicide hold. So if there's somebody who frequently has attempts, if you're parents to a kid who has frequent attempts and you really don't feel safe, because that's what the object, that's what the objective is in that scenario, is to get them into a 24-hour monitored safety hold, because you, as their care provider, you need sleep, like you're just a human as well. So sometimes professional help is needed, but what kind of professional help do they prefer? What kind of professional help, where do they feel most comfortable? Because different emergency rooms handle things differently. So you can do a safety plan around the types of professional decisions you would like to make in event of a crisis. Like, I prefer to go to this hospital over this hospital because my counselor or psychiatrist is actually in touch with this hospital or tangential to and has releases signed for them and things like that. So you can get, a package of pre-signed releases, emergency contacts, things like that, and admit them to the same facility. So that can also be a part of a safety plan if hospitalization is just a part of the reality of that situation, because sometimes it is. All right. So that's what a safety plan can include. I think we will kind of consolidate all that information in a format that is, kind of something somebody can print out, fill out, or keep an electronic copy of, whichever you would prefer, or just use as a guideline to keep on hand for these sorts of situations. If you're a parent or a friend, or somebody who could really use this or aspects of it, we will make that a resource.
Yes, and thank you for that information, because that was very cohesive and very helpful. And I didn't even think about something like that, but knowing like your preferred hospital or care provider is definitely a next level step and support that could really help someone to not be like traumatized further.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that is the goal.
Yes.
So we will put a link in our show notes to access that safety plan. Kat, do you recommend, if someone, let's say an individual, they've kind of been listening to this episode, they're like, yeah, I definitely struggle with suicidal ideation, and they decide to fill out the safety plan. Is it something they should tell somebody about, or they just are going to put it in their purse, or what are they going to do with it after they fill it out?
So safety plans are most useful when somebody else knows about it, because like we said, in a crisis state, you're going to forget all about that safety plan, and you're not really thinking that anybody needs it in that moment, and you feel alone and isolated. And yeah, you might want to do the internal coping strategies that are listed on there, but that might not feel accessible. So sharing it with somebody you trust or your clinician. Oftentimes clinicians, when you say that you have any form of ideation, they would do an assessment for risk likelihood to make sure that you are safe to go home. And they, assess things like whether you have access to lethal means or not, and will take your lethal means or hold them temporarily to, improve your safety. But they generally have you fill out a safety plan and have it, because it's best used in community.
Yeah, that's great. And I think to that point too, because I love you did, love sounds like a strong word, but you mentioned like if you're a parent to a child with suicidal ideation or tendencies, I think even this way to create the safety plan with them and feel like not blaming them or being like there's something wrong with you or you're seeking attention, but more like let's make a plan together. Like when you're feeling really sad or overwhelmed or like you're all alone, like these are the fun activities you can do. And almost like that way it's like if they like need to just go on a walk or they need to like play video games for an hour, they have something to point to. And maybe in those really emotionally triggered or high situations, the parents don't have to be like, you're always playing games, do your homework. They can kind of be like, look, I'm following my plan, I need to do this.
Yeah, I have had people fill out safety plans and put things in them like, my internal coping strategy is to sleep. And, we know with depression, we want to encourage healthy forms of coping. So I would say video games should not be on the safety plan. That's what I would say personally. But if you think it is genuinely beneficial and distracting, I think everything can be individualized. But I do think that a safety plan is a useful tool to connect people and make people feel concerned and cared for and like they're on a team. And this isn't just an issue they deal with alone, but an issue that people want to provide support for. Like it feels like a team effort at that point when you do it with somebody.
Yeah, it's good. So whether it's like your parent or you're the parent or it's your partner in a romantic way or your best friend, ultimately, we just want to encourage you to find someone you trust and can share this with, and to remind you to remind them about your safety plan in the moment of a crisis. Which, because like you said, you might not remember that you have that plan or like to implement those tools, but you might be able to text or call that person.
Another thing is with a safety plan, it opens up for discussion. And because warning signs are a part of this, the main goal is that you never get to a moment where it is absolutely as, far off desirable or you're like emotionally unreachable because people are paying attention to your warning signs. Safety plans are changeable, right? The safety plan you have this month might not be the best. You might develop new skills that you want to put on it next month, or you might have done everything on your safety plan and still had a non-fatal but serious attempt, and that's something to update, right? So it's just another way to have communication around it that can be useful in scary times.
That's great. Then the other steps that we want to encourage you to take is kind of like what we're doing right now. It's by helping others with your story and helping to increase awareness and access to resources through connecting with your own story and sharing that with other people to continue to reduce the stigma and help all people get access to the resources and mental health care that they need.
Yeah, so if you look around in your rural environment and feel like nobody's talking about this and you wonder if you're alone, maybe starting a Facebook group, right? It doesn't have to be physical locality. But there's also other things you can do. And if you are a suicide survivor, and your story can be really powerful, and it can feel really useful to give back to organizations like AFSP, and to even just go to the walk once a year as somebody who struggled in the past and is a survivor now. Those sorts of things can, I'm always so surprised by how many people are there and how people really join around, and everybody looks at this at that specific event. We all wear beads that represent different things. So you see that people have so many different complex relationships with this experience. Using your story helps give you purpose, right? To turn your pain into a sense of healing for others can help decrease the shame around it and be really inspirational. And instead of feeling like there was ever something wrong with you or this is a part of your past you would hide, using it to talk to those who are going through it currently can really give you a sense of purpose that can be very beneficial, and a sense of community as well.
Yeah, I think that was a great point. Anything else you want to go over and kind of steps that you encourage people to take?
Be compassionate to all. Even if you don't agree with somebody's way of life, be nice to each other, please.
Make love, not war.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think what we are all very excited to go over is neuro hacks. What can we actually do to rewire our brains to be more likely to feel joy and to see the positives and to feel our community and to know we're important?
Yes, Maddie, I would love to know how you went from being such a philosophical, existential kind of cynic about life to this life coach You are just a ray of sunshine in my life. Like, what did you do to your brain? I want to know.
Yeah, it's probably really hard for people who don't know me to be like, what? you were the person. Okay, I think there's a lot of things. I think one, like I shared more extensively in episode 1 last, I think losing our mom and that actually happening was a very pivotal moment for me. And I want to be really clear that you do not have to allow that to happen to you. You do. It is a myth that you have to hit your bottom point or lose everything to change. And that's part of the power in me sharing my story, right? Is that I had to go through an incredibly traumatic and life-altering event to have a wake-up call and change, but that does not mean you do. So in terms of practical changes, I think what that event allowed me to do that I think is step 1 in my experience. And now as a life coach and a spiritual life coach and someone that actually helps people make new behaviors. And I would have hated this for myself 6 years ago. Like younger me would have despised this, but it is true. The first thing you have to do is choose to believe that there is a different option. You have to choose to believe you might be wrong, first of all. And if you can't choose that you might be wrong, because I don't think I could have done that before, but I think what you can do is you choose to know that even if you're right, that part of your power or part of your ability as a human is to choose to be delusional. And I think especially if you are very depressed or very anxious, or you have an identity that is being suppressed by others, or you're not believed, I think that actually can be the best place to start, is to just choose to believe, even if you are right, that life is pointless and it will never get better. But just pretend for a second you were right about that. Just choose to be delusional that it's going to be okay anyway.
Yes, I always say if you're going to lie to yourself, why not make the lies something that help you? So like if you're gonna if your perception is just that, your perception and opinion, and it is only as close to reality as humanly possible, which is not super possible, if that is the case, then you know what it's like to actively perceive things in a negative way. It is harmful, hence the self-harm. What if you lied to yourself that it's all fine, it's all going to work out, and I am loved and people want me around? What if you just lied in ways that changed your mindset, not because you believe them, but because what you're doing right now isn't working? Yeah.
And I think that's such a good point, is like, I think foundation 1, at least for me, in my experience, foundation 1 is choosing to believe that a different, like something else could happen, right? But then the action behind that is exactly what you were saying, Kat, is like, okay, so how do you do that? So the first thing is you can't hear anybody's thoughts. Right now, you're probably assuming everyone thinks badly of you. And that could be true. But what we're going to start doing is we're going to pretend like everything they say is so great. They think that you are the best thing that's ever happened. They think you are so funny and so smart. You're going to start choosing to believe the best thing, especially in the stuff you can't have proof of either way. Like you can't have proof that someone was looking at you in a positive or negative way. You can't have proof of what they're actually believing about you or what they're saying to people behind your back. So you're going to start choosing to believe that they are positive.
And when they look at you, they don't see what you see. Just like when you look at them, you don't see all their insecurities.
So yeah, step 1 is choosing to believe that the reality might be different than what you think it is. Believing that people are thinking positively of you, expecting the best in a situation. And then the next step, which will be part of the things that will be covered in the safety plan template, is figuring out activities or hobbies you can do that actually make you excited about being alive. I feel like that sounds so, I get it, because I know whenever this was first given to me and I had very intense depression and I was like, no, that's so stupid. Literally some of the things on my list that I still go back to today was to sit down and do my makeup. like literally do my makeup, cuddle with my dog Stacks, even like writing or even watching Netflix and watching a funny movie. And I even had certain movies down that always make me laugh, like The Proposal. And those are things that sound so simple. And especially if you don't have depression, that might sound really dumb. Why do you need a list to tell you to watch a funny movie? But to Kat's point, whenever you're in those moments or even like longer term anxiety and depression, your brain is not functioning in a way that's thinking about stuff rationally or making choices. You're just thinking about how sad you are and how much you're tired and you want to sleep and that you're wrong and no one likes you. So if you have that list and you can connect with activities that make you feel happy, even if they seem really silly or mundane, just starting to do those every single day.
So like Maddie was saying, habits that increase my joy, but also other things that help me produce serotonin. For me, I really need to feel like I'm nourishing my body, and food is medicine. And I show myself love and make myself feel important and like I give a shit about myself. But I treat myself like a houseplant. I make sure I get enough water and enough sunshine in a day. Okay? And I know that, like Maddie said, if you're not depressed, you're like, wow, this is just how to live. I think that a lot of people can relate to this because I see it everywhere where people are like, did you know you need 15 minutes of sunshine in the morning rather than 15 minutes of blue light? And it's true. The things that increase your serotonin production are omega-3 fatty acids. You should be eating fats, healthy fats to increase joy. Like that is just brain science. Fish oil pills if you don't eat fish. Eggs have good fats. Nuts have good fats. I mean, we'll do a whole other thing on diet, and there are so many good books on what you can eat based off of certain mental health diagnoses that help with your brain chemistry.
To your point, like women eating higher fat diets is really important for emotional regulation, specifically in menstruating age women.
Your brain is made of healthy fat. Like it is made of healthy fat. I remember some of my first years getting sober or trying to get happy. Me and Maddie do a lot of like inner child work. So I learned how to hula hoop and learned how to cartwheel. And like healing is cringy. As somebody who was so self-conscious about caring about anything and made my entire personality refusing to care, healing is so, it can be cringy, but you have to lean into that and find your delight, microdose delight.
And I think if you, to your point, if like you can just sit down and really think about yourself when you were 5 to 8, and what did you lose all your time doing? What made you so happy? Right. And if you have trouble thinking about that from happy memories, what did your parents ground you from? That can help you to remember what actually brought you joy and then incorporating that into your life as an adult now.
Yeah. And even if it's watching a comedian, but just anything that, even if it's fake smiling at yourself in the mirror, those muscle movements actually tell your brain to be happy. So there are things like that.
Well, there was one thing I wanted to say that, because I agree with you that nutrition and inner child play and all that stuff, that is so important. But when I'm thinking about me 6 years ago, when literally all I could think about was being dead all the time, that feels really like a lot. And so that's what, and living with someone, we won't go into this, but the last couple of years I've lived with someone that was still in the middle of very, very extreme depression, among other things. I think when you start thinking food and sunshine and inner child work and therapy, they can start to feel like, oh, I'm still not good enough because I can't do all of those things. And so, and those are very important, but I think that's step 10. And so if right now, literally all you can do is color in a coloring book while you're watching TV, because otherwise you're just gonna scroll on your phone mindlessly on TikTok. You can start with the little things like the nutrition and the going outside and getting more water. Those things are so important. I am not underscoring how important those are. You will never be able to maintain the happiness that you find if you can't change your lifestyle, right? Sleeping more, getting more water, reducing or hopefully eliminating alcohol. These things are dramatically important. And if you can't do that right now, I think the bigger thing is to try to find smaller tweaks, like you're doing less.
Yeah.
Right? It's more important to like eat chips than to not eat at all, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. No, you are
like, that clear.
Yes, no, that is a very good and clear there. That's a very useful and effective clarification. Yeah, we don't want to be overwhelming. There is no perfect way to heal. I think everybody's journey looks differently. If there is one small biohack you can do to start changing your thinking, even if that is just texting somebody every day, or not every day, but deciding to reach out to somebody when you think of them, or spreading love. I guess I was just thinking of ways to produce serotonin specifically.
And the thing is, everything you said is so good. I just also know I couldn't
That
do
it's
that.
overwhelming. Yeah.
Well, it's not, I don't even know. I don't think it is overwhelming objectively. I just know that when I was there in that, I couldn't do that. Right? It's like if you cannot be on your phone for 30 minutes to an hour when you wake up, and you can go outside and you can delay caffeine intake and you can drink water all day, those alone are going to give you so much better habits, but the feelings, right? But for right now, if all you can do is maybe think of one person in your life that you like and tell them something you like about them, right? Or write down something that you're grateful for every day in a journal or in your notes app. We can start really, really small. And I promise those things might seem useless and silly in the beginning, but you will notice. Like when Kat, you were saying, what did I do? Those are the things I did.
Mm-hmm.
Like now, right? It's like I meditate every day and I do dance every day and I journal and do breath work and do all this water and nutrition stuff. But like that was years for me. And the first step was trying to answer my friends when they texted me.
Everybody's going to look a little bit different because socially, I probably would have not gone the social route as far as increasing serotonin and finding joy and rewiring your brain goes. Finding one thing you can be consistent with, whatever that is for you personally, and making it something positive in your life. And it doesn't have to be the same thing every day. If you struggle with consistency, the thing is to just stop beating yourself up. Show yourself that you care in whatever way that is. If that is eating because you haven't been eating.
A bath with candles.
Yeah, if that is just leaving your room to go to the bathroom, I don't know. You could be peeing in a jug this whole time. Whatever it is, wherever you are, just your baby step, not ours or somebody else's, or all the steps at once.
That's such a good point.
Yeah, like
these steps in expected to take a long time.
Yeah, and what changes is compassion for yourself, right? All right. I am really curious, Maddie, about ways, biohacks, neurohacks, whatever, ways to rewire maybe. I know this one's going to be a hard one for you with ADHD and needing medication.
That means I have extra good answers if you're going to ask me about executive functioning and decreasing impulsivity.
Yes, but real quick before we jump away from serotonin, I will tell you that in my biggest depressive, suicidal spurt, other than counseling, the one thing I did was I listened to a professor and I got on antidepressant medication. And there is no shame in it. And it doesn't matter. My mom was on it and I've been on and off of it. Everybody's road to medication is different. But if there is one thing you can do, you can reach out to your PCP and you don't even have to get on your computer to get yourself an SSRI. If that is what you need to get out of peeing in the jug in your room or whatever dark hole you're in and whatever you're doing, I will not underscore, I would have died without that medication at that time. And that medication helped me be able to crawl out of my hole and make it to class or whatever obligation I had. It made those habits of increasing joy doable.
Available to you. Yes. That is such a good point. I'm actually so glad you said that, especially because at least in my social media, I am seeing a resurgence of talking negatively about SSRIs specifically. And I want to also put in very quickly, same, because I was very resistant to taking antidepressants. That's a story for an SSRI episode, but it changed my life. I was having debilitating panic attacks multiple times a day and still was refusing to take medication. And basically, I was trying to get treatment for allergies. And I had such a bad panic attack in the doctor's office that the doctor looked at me and said, "Life does not have to be this hard. Also, I cannot treat you for allergies until you get this panic under control, because I won't be able to tell if your body is having an allergic reaction and you're going to die, or if you're having a panic attack. So I can't treat you until you get this under control." But that's what forced me to finally go. And anyway, it did change my life. And I agree with you that, because like I had this voice in my head, even from my own like neuroscience education, that SSRIs were not actually that effective for the majority of people unless you had like basically severe depression and severe depression.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't more helpful than a placebo, because there is some research around that, and we're not gonna get into that in this episode. But don't let the current research coming out or what people are talking about or old. Try it for yourself first. Be patient. Not every medication responds in the same way. You might have to try different ones. You might have to try around with the dose. The thing is, we do not fully understand the neuromechanisms of why they work. And that is true. But it is also true that they do work.
So, yeah. So increasing serotonin production through diet is one thing. However, how SSRIs work is they block a reuptake inhibitor and allow the serotonin to stay in your synapse for longer, which means that if you're depressed, let's say, and we don't necessarily, there's still new research.
That whole model's being debunked, though.
I know. That's what I was just.
So okay.
There's still research coming out about the chemical imbalance theory and how that it's wrong. Like we said, neuroscience is a very, very new field. Okay, things are changing all the time. However, we're talking about increasing serotonin production through diet. We can also talk about juicing those little serotonin molecules for all they're worth by blocking your reuptake inhibitors. There are life experiences that say that for some people, me being one, Mads being another, for some people, when you can't access better behaviors, when you can't access new habits, that is what medication is for. Now, there is a lot of fear around long-term use of medication and what it's for, and I totally understand and hear that, and I'm not a psychiatrist. However, my personal experience is I would not have been able to look at myself in the mirror. I couldn't go to class. I couldn't brush my hair. I wasn't showering. I wasn't using deodorant. I wasn't brushing my teeth. I wasn't taking care of my body at all. And I had no desire to. And I had a professor look me in the eyes and said, "There is no shame. You are no less intelligent. You are no less of a human being. If you need these, I use them still every day." And he was a neuroscience professor that I highly looked up to. And he said, "Just think about it." And I was like, all I needed was the permission. And I got on them and I was able to access behaviors. And today I am off of them, which is a little bit TMI, whatever your goal is.
Well, you know what? I actually think it's important to share, because I am off them too. And I think that is one of the big rhetorics going around right now, is that you'll never be able to get off of them. And like, as soon as you get off of them, everything will go back. And so I think it's actually equally important for us to say, yes, I started them. It gave me access to these behaviors. And like, look at us. These behaviors have integrated into our lives. We're now functioning, overall happy, and also off of these medications.
Yes, the medications, and that is not true for everybody. I don't want to shame anybody who is still on medication and still needs medication. I'm not denying whatever the powers that may be. Okay, I am just saying that I was on them. I needed them at that time. They helped access behaviors for me. I was lucky enough to be able to get off of them. I know some people who aren't, some people who are. Anyways, something to be considered when talking about suicidality and major depressive disorders or depressive episodes. This is a tool that is out there that I used. There is no shame in it, and it could help.
I agree 100%. Because at least in my experience, it's like, it just, never mind. So that's not relevant right now. I am really glad you brought that up because I think it's really important. Let's talk about executive functioning and decreasing impulsivity. Because like we talked about, especially last episode, these are things that are highly linked to suicidal ideation and suicide attempts. And as someone
highly linked to, I'm so sorry. It's highly linked to attempts more than ideation. So like the likelihood of somebody attempting is based off of, rather than just having these feelings and thoughts and emotions, the attempts themselves are linked to the working memory and executive function and impulsivity.
Okay, no, that's really good you clarified that. That also just shows my working memory issues.
Oh.
Yes, but these are things that actually affect me quite a bit as someone that has ADHD and has been working with it my whole life, especially in the last 5 years as I've become a healthier version of me and not relying on negative coping skills as much. One, to continue the medication conversation. This is obviously something that we cannot tell you to do. This is something that needs to be talked about with, a good psychiatrist. But even that is like a whole episode, I think, like how to find a good psychiatrist that doesn't belittle you or make you feel bad. So this is my PSA to you as you're a new friend, that if you find a psychiatrist, and especially you are a woman, and you are more likely to be dismissed, right? That you don't take the first opinion seriously because they could be wrong. So if you have an internal experience that a doctor is telling you is wrong, you need to believe yourself first and keep talking to different doctors until somebody believes you and listens to you. And that goes for all things, not just ADHD, not just depression. That's literally everything. I think that's actually probably the underlying core belief of this podcast for me and Kat, is believing yourself over other people first. Not into that could get dangerous, but you know what I mean, within reason. And so, but in terms of what can actually change your executive functioning, decrease impulsivity, and improve your working memory besides just medication, one, because that is not for everybody, and or just to support it, I think the biggest things that helped me is definitely meditation. And there are actually different types of meditation. I am now fully certified as a meditation and breathwork facilitator and 500-hour yoga teacher. So I've done pretty in-depth studying in this. And I think one thing that's really important to say is that meditation is kind of a buzzword now, but there are many different types of meditation, and all meditation is not equal. So don't just type in meditation in some random app or YouTube. Like, you need to look for meditation specifically for building attention or specifically for anxiety or depression. Make sure it's a reliable source. But I remember one of the most important things in my yoga teacher training was that there were actually times when I was learning a certain meditation or a certain type of breath work, and it would say, do not use this in someone that's depressed. Do not use this in someone that's anxious, because it can actually make you more depressed or more anxious if you're doing the wrong types. So I did want to give that clarifying nudge really fast. But outside of that, meditation and breath work has been the game changer for me for increasing attention and memory and decreasing impulsivity. And the most basic one you can do is called focused attention meditation. It's the OG when you think of meditation and looking at a candle. So you literally can just light a candle or put one on YouTube. You don't have to do anything fancy. You literally just need to soften your gaze and look at this candle for as long as you can without blinking every day, and just like increase the time every day. And that alone can literally rewire your brain, strengthen your prefrontal cortex, make you better at attention and memory. And there has been research that as little as literally like 7 minutes a week can actually increase your attention span. So literally just do 1 minute a day to start. So
That's
crazy.
incredible.
I know, it's crazy. It really is cool. And it really did change my life. I mean, that's why I teach it now. And you guys are just getting to know me, but you can tell I have a lot of energy. So whenever people meet me, they're like, you teach yoga and meditation. Yeah, because I need it the most. So this is just my PSA to you that if you have a lot of energy and a wild attention span and you've tried to meditate a bunch of times and you shut your eyes and then all you can think about is like leaping elephants and the 50 things you didn't do yet, and you're fidgeting your fingers and your legs and you're thinking, I can't meditate. This is your, I don't know. Wait, just try different things. Try different kinds until you find something. You can also just dance. Do you have anything you want to add to building? I'd say meditation is really my biggest one, but I mean, even doing Sudoku or chess or any kind of problem solving things, that's something I've personally been doing this year, is learning how to play chess because it makes me really bored. I like fast-paced games. I don't like strategic long-term thinking games. And so I've really been forcing myself to practice, like trying to make it fun on Duolingo. So I think things that you're interested in and force you to work on those skills, which sounds like no duh, but to actually do them is the challenge.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of things you touched on that I didn't even know about meditation.
Meditation changes your whole brain.
It actually changes physical structures of your brain.
Like, I mean, literally, it literally changes your brain.
Yeah, I am heavily supportive of meditation as well. I meditate. How do I increase executive functioning, decrease impulsivity, and improve my working memory? I'm going to be honest. I just try to do old-fashioned things. Some of that includes, forest bathing. I know that there's a lot of research recently coming out about how just being in nature can positively affect your prefrontal cortex, the area that deals with executive functioning, working memory, modulating that. Also, there's research stating that daily walks are really good, especially for regulating stress hormones, things that might also affect your ability to modulate your mood. And then for working memory specifically, walking and talking. So like finding a friend or somebody to walk with and talking to them. Even if they're not like physically there, taking a walk once a day and calling that one friend you feel good talking to. Or just your parents, right? Whoever, just finding connection, but maybe walking and talking can really improve your working memory. I also try to cut out bad things. Like I try to take vacations from TV and from my phone. Nothing like good old outside time. So when I was a kid, I was required to play outside for a long period of time. I was also required to chug water before I went outside. I lived in a very weird house. But anyways, I spend time outside, exercising daily, but I do that for hormones and for mood stabilization as well, because I have very unstable moods and exercise helps me with that quite a bit. As far as working memory, don't smoke marijuana. There's actually a lot of emotional regulation issues. I remember when I was first diagnosed and I was highly suicidal, one of the first things my counselor said is your baseline, your emotional baseline, your stress baseline, all of that is all out of whack because you are smoking marijuana daily. So I know that is something nobody wants to hear if you are a recreational user, but not smoking marijuana will help improve your working memory and parts of your brain that are responsible for emotional regulation. So if you are suicidal and smoking marijuana, drinking. So really any of these self-sabotaging behaviors. So I'm going to talk about substances because that was my relationship to it as well. There are lots of people there is research behind the fact that alcohol or substances in general will increase the risk for an attempt because they decrease your executive functioning and, increase impulsivity and reckless behavior because you are literally intoxicated. So it's a lot of attempts can also happen due to intoxication. That can even be from like over-the-counter things. So careful with substances, especially if you are suicidal or have tendencies towards that way, or if you're highly depressed, maybe drinking because it's a depressant and what it does to your brain and your mood. Maybe take a break and get counseling and talk to your doctor about it. Yeah.
I agree. I think really the summation of this whole last section is to find things that genuinely make you happy to add into your life, whether that's food or exercise or going outside or playing or doing puzzles or games, spending time with your friends. Find things you can add into your life that make you happy so that you're not trying to do things to numb out how bad you feel. And instead, you're putting good things in.
Also, yeah. So Mads is, I think, taking an additive approach, and I'm going to take a subtracting approach where even just getting rid of things that make you feel worse is a good way to show yourself you care. So if you feel like you have
I'm gonna cut you off, one, because I'm being rude, but two, because you have to do something else with that time that you normally would be drinking. So you need to do something fun.
Yes, in theory. However, I'm imagining somebody who is like laying in bed and can't do anything. And I get that boredom can be a part of this. But in order to not overwhelm someone, like going back to, let's imagine somebody in a hole peeing in a jug or whatever, if you are in that hole and all you are doing is consuming negative content on your phone, stay in your hole without your phone. Like start with subtracting something that is harmful. If you are in that hole and you are with a bottle of whatever liquor of choice or a 30 rack of beer, take away the beer. Stay in your room, watch movies all day, pee in your jug, but take away the beer and see what difference just taking away something harmful could do. And then, of course, adding new things, positive things is also great. I think both together is where like real
Yeah.
yeah, is where like
You're right.
you're sprinting towards change. But
Yeah,
if
you're
you
right.
can't
I no, you're totally right. And I think this is why it's good to have both of our perspectives at the same time. This is again where it's good for us to have our different dynamics, because I've never had a substance use disorder. I have had times though where I have used substances in a not healthy way. And so we're coming at it from a different approach, because to me, as someone that didn't have a substance use disorder, but has had moments in my life where I have used substances in unhealthy ways, which is a very big distinction, that to me it's like drinking because you just don't want to think about what else is going on or because you're bored. To me, like, I think I needed something extra exciting to switch out. But like, in your point of view, if you are seriously using something on a daily basis and it's a huge part of your identity and how you're spending your time, just reducing or removing that is going to make a really big difference.
yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes, and that is not recovery advice. That is depression, suicidality advice. Recovery is a whole nother
Topic.
thing as well. Yeah. Essentially, ways to improve your working memory is get rid of anything that is harming your working memory. And that includes short form content. Okay. So that includes your little toxic box. Okay. So if you do not have a substance use disorder, but you are depressed and all you do is stare at this little thing, chuck it across the room for 2 hours and see how much better you feel. I know you're listening to us on it right now, but chuck it.
Yeah.
It'll help.
To your point, because you can even, or if you need to delete the apps, like social media apps from your phone, and listen to an audiobook or listen to a podcast, even just things that are more long form and make you think more. And it's not just thousands of 8-second videos. That would help.
Yes. And to Maddie's point, it's your baby step. If if you haven't been eating for days, whatever you can get in your mouth works. If you haven't been sleeping for days, if you've got to sleep during the day hours, like you'll find your way. We believe in you, but just little things. And one last thing I almost forgot is that a big aspect of any form of healing is that you do it in community. So I know we talked a lot about how suicide is a very isolating experience. So yes, the habits are good. Yes, the brain hacking is good, but humans need connection. There are studies that show that connection is key to our well-being, emotional and otherwise. Yeah, don't do this alone. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good point. And probably the most supportive thing you could do of all things is to find people to spend time with that you feel safe with. Yeah.
All right, Mads, you have anything else to add?
I am just really glad we did this. I'm glad that we took the risk to start out really strong with something as intense and such a massive topic as suicide awareness and prevention. And we thank you guys for being here.
Yes.
Well, I feel like I have learned so much over these past 2 episodes. Seriously. I'm really glad for our different perspectives, and I hope that you have enjoyed this as well.
I have learned a lot from you as well. And if you enjoyed listening, leave us a review, write meow.
It's seriously a rough time out here as up and coming podcasters, and reviews help us get the word out to new listeners and help us to grow with and for our audience.
If you have any topic suggestions for our future episodes, please reach out to us via direct message on our Instagram page at RewiredWomanPod.
We appreciate you for supporting us. Come back next Wednesday where we get into the neuroscience of intuition. I'm really excited for that one. Love you, Kat.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.
We're so cute.